Hello, my name is Jenny Rozelle. I'm an estate and elder law attorney at Indiana Estate and Elder Law. Today we're going to be talking about keeping the peace within a blended family, and specifically from an estate planning perspective. And I suppose the way to kick this conversation off is by defining what I mean when I say blended family. And what I mean when I say blended family is perhaps a family that's a husband and a wife, that one or both of them have kids from a prior relationship or a prior marriage. And so one or both of them is coming to the marriage or their relationship with children from prior to their relationship. So, for starters, the absolute last thing that you should do from an estate planning perspective is to do no estate planning at all. And what I mean by that is when you have no estate plan, we have no guidance on what your wishes even were. And so that ultimately just creates a lot of confusion and chaos. And sometimes that results in hurt feelings and emotions. And sometimes lawyers get involved because there's litigation there. And of course, that's the last thing people want, is they've lost their mom or their dad or maybe both. And now we have a very messy estate situation on our hand, and top that off with a blended family. And so, one of the common questions that I think I get from a client that's a blended family is a will enough? Is a last will and testament sufficient for our situation? And my short answer is, I don't know, because I don't know enough about you to be able to tell you whether that is enough. And, every time I think about this question, I think about a past client, and I won't share names for confidentiality purposes, but, my office helped a husband and a wife. And husband wanted one person, wife wanted another person. And we knew full and well that as soon as one of them passed away, the other one would immediately be in our office to change the documents. And they only did a last will and testament, so they each had a last will and testament. Fast forward some time, the husband passes away, the wife comes in, wants to change her will, take out who her husband wanted, and she's allowed to do that. And the reason I struggle with this question is because wills are documents that simply have no bearing. They have no bearing until we've passed away. And so from that standpoint, I can't control through just a will what happens following that first passing, because if you leave everything to each other, then ultimately at the first passing, things just going to go to the surviving of the spouses, and they have free will to change and update their will. And so that's what happened in this story that I just shared. Is ultimately the wife came in, changed her will, and the person her husband wanted to get his stuff, that person's not getting it anymore. So for the question of, is a will enough? I actually had a meeting just earlier today when I'm filming this, of a blended family. And I told them, I'm like, a will is enough if you have so much trust and, pinky promise to each other that the other one's not going to change the governing document after we pass. And, in the back of my mind, I think every year I practice law, I get a little bit more cynical. And so often people will sit there and say, oh, I won't change it. And I've been doing this long enough now, for more than a decade, that I've seen people say that, and then someone passes away and they totally are doing exactly what they said that they wouldn't do. So in those situations, a will wasn't enough, was it? It wasn't enough because it couldn't control what the person was trying to accomplish. And so that often leads me to bring up during these conversations something called a living trust. And I think a lot of times people make up a lot of stuff in their heads about trust. I don't have enough money for a trust, or that's too fancy, or that's only for rich people. And what I always tell people is I don't help I don't help, I don't help the uber wealthy, and I just help every kind of everyday people. And whether or not that person does a will or a trust, I have no dog in that fight. However, sometimes a trust does make things easier. And this is one of those instances that does make things easier. And what I mean by that is when you have a living trust, you actually take a lot or most of your assets and move them into the name of your trust while you're living. And then from that standpoint, your trust document is what's controlling what happens with those assets. And say, for example, you do have a concern about, you're a blended family and you just want to make sure that, what you guys sit here and talk about is actually going to take place. And that can be done through a trust, because a trust has stipulations as to what happens at the first passing and then what happens after the second passing. And there are ways in my world that I can put restrictions and kind of control put some parameters inside the document to restrict the survivor from, kicking out your kids. And whether or not we want to talk about it, I can't do my job if I don't learn about all of these things. And so, whether a will or a trust is, sufficient for you as you're sitting here listening, I don't know. And that's why I often tell people that, the last thing you should do is just keep avoiding the conversation, right? And keep avoiding the conversation and never doing any kind of planning. And eventually, I hope that you end up in front of someone like me so I can kind of explain the options and specifically how they relate to you and your spouse. And from there, we can figure out whether a will is sufficient, or maybe we do want a trust to control things. So if you're part of a blended family, and I tell people often that I think blended families is, that word has some sort of connotation that I don't intend for it to have. I think it's just being very realistic of someone's circumstances and someone's situation. But what I can tell you is that blended families, if you don't get your estate plan in order, you're probably more at risk for chaos and confusion than maybe someone, that's not part of a blended family. So I recommend that you take the time and put some time, effort, and money into putting together a comprehensive estate plan to take care of you and your family. So if me or my office are, we're happy to help. If we can be of any service to you, you feel free to call. Our number is 317-863-2030. Or you can visit us on our website. It's got a plethora of great information on it. It is indianaestateelderlaw.com. And even if you're a out-of-state listener and you perhaps want a referral to someone out-of-state that's kind of like, me and my office, feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email. We'd be happy to provide referrals for you. So until then, take care. This is Jenny Rozelle from Indiana Estate and Elder Law. Thank you.